Hey everyone, it's Dr. Nightstare. Glad you're here. Before we get into it, hit like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Quick question before we start. Where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? Alright, let's get settled. Get comfortable, let your body relax, and just take it easy. My days followed a precise rhythm. The sun rose, painting a rectangle on my kitchen floor, and I drank my tea. I ate the same breakfast. Apartment 3B felt like an extension of my skin, a quiet shell. The walls absorbed sounds from the hallway, filtering them to a distant murmur. I rarely left my door. I preferred the enclosed air, the familiar scent of old paper. I patched cracks in plaster with a putty knife, smoothed the edges, then painted over them. The loose hinge on the bathroom cabinet door always needed tightening, a task I completed with a screwdriver. These repairs filled my time, acts of control in a world I could not control outside my own four walls. The thought of meeting a new person, of having to speak, sent a shiver down my back. My throat would tighten and my hands would clench. I avoided eye contact in the rare moments I found myself in the elevator, preferring the safety of my reflection in the brass doors. I knew my neighbors by their sounds. Mrs. Henderson above me played her classical music at 5 o'clock. The young couple next door argued in the evenings. I collected these sounds, piecing together lives I would never touch. The building itself breathed around me, a living entity. One Tuesday, the pattern of the third floor fractured. I heard moving boxes dragged across the linoleum floor of apartment 3A. Thumping and scraping replaced the usual domestic cadence. A new neighbor. I listened intently. I heard a woman's voice, clear, directing movers. My heart began to beat faster. She arrived alone, carrying a plant in a ceramic pot. I watched through my peephole, a sliver of vision. Her hair was dark and she wore a blue dress. She looked tired but moved with purpose. She opened her door and disappeared inside. A desire to know more about her took root in my chest. Days turned into weeks. I learned her schedule. Her footsteps were on the hallway carpet in the mornings. I heard the click of her lock, the closing of her door. She returned in the evenings, sometimes carrying groceries, sometimes a book. I watched her through the peephole as she waited for the elevator, her face calm, her eyes often scanning the hallway. Sometimes she carried a yellow bag. I imagined the things she carried inside it. My world, once self-contained, now revolved around her movements, her sounds. The shared wall between our apartments became a conduit. I pressed my ear against it, listening for the sounds of her life. The splash of water as she washed dishes, the thud of a book dropping to the floor, the melody of a song playing. I wanted to speak to her. The thought formed, then dissolved into an eddy of fear. My tongue felt thick. My throat closed. What would I say? How would I begin? A greeting felt like an impossible climb. The fear paralyzed me, rooting me to my own side of the wall. I pictured her smile, imagined her speaking my name. The image brought warmth, immediately followed by the grip of anxiety. It was safer to observe, to know her through the walls and the glimpses. This knowledge grew inside me, an expanding presence. She was a puzzle I tried to solve piece by piece, without ever touching the actual pieces. I knew the color of her shoes, the way she tied her hair, the scent of her laundry detergent that sometimes drifted into the hallway. My existence became a quiet gaze, focused entirely on her. One morning, I left my apartment to check the mail. The elevator doors opened and she stood inside. My breath caught and my stomach tightened with a familiar dread as I stepped in, facing the brass doors, trying not to look at her. The doors closed, sealing us inside the small metal box. I felt her presence beside me, a distinct warmth in the enclosed space. The air felt charged with her closeness. I could smell the subtle scent of her laundry detergent, the same one I sometimes caught drifting in the hallway. My entire body became rigid. The descent felt endless, each floor passing with extreme slowness. I gripped the strap of my mailbag, my knuckles white and aching. My mind raced, searching for any words, any simple greeting, but my tongue felt thick and unresponsive. It was a physical block in my throat, preventing any sound. I pictured her face, the calm expression I had seen through the peephole. I imagined myself turning, offering a simple hello and a small smile. The words were there, practiced countless times in my mind, but they remained trapped, held hostage by my paralyzing fear. My body refused to obey. I could sense her gaze, a light pressure on my cheek, though I did not dare confirm it by turning my head. The silence stretched, broken only by the soft sound of the elevator's descent. She cleared her throat, a soft, deliberate sound that startled me. "Good morning," she said, her voice soft and clear, filling the tiny space. My heart pounded against my ribs, frantic and loud. "Morning," I managed, the word barely a whisper, my voice rough and hoarse from disuse. I did not look at her. My gaze remained fixed on the dull brass doors, reflecting a distorted image of my own anxious face. There was a pause. I could feel her waiting, perhaps for me to offer something more, but I had nothing left to give. The moment hung there, heavy and mist. The elevator reached the ground floor with a gentle thud. The doors opened. I rushed out, my face hot and my hands trembling uncontrollably. I walked quickly to the mailboxes, pulled out my letters without really seeing them, then went straight back up, taking the stairs two at a time, needing to escape the closeness. I felt a wave of shame. I had missed a chance to speak to her. I had been given a clear opportunity, and I had failed completely. The disappointment was a bitter taste in my mouth, sharp and persistent. I had allowed my fear to win again, dominating my actions. Later that day, the memory of her voice still sounded in my ears, a reminder of my failure. I walked down the hallway to put out my recycling. Her door, apartment 3A, stood open a crack. A narrow sliver of light escaped from within, cutting through the dim hallway. My breath caught in my throat and I stopped, my recycling bag slipping from my grasp to land softly on the carpet. The careful order of my thoughts, the boundaries I had meticulously built around my observations, began to fray and then shatter. I stood frozen, my eyes fixed on the open door. My mind presented a stark choice: walk away or approach. The desire to understand, to bridge the distance between us, intensified into a compelling force, pulling me forward. I peered through the narrow gap in the door. I saw the edge of a vibrant painting on the wall and a glimpse of a sturdy wooden chair. No sounds came from within the apartment. She must have forgotten to close it. Or she was inside, just out of sight, perhaps in another room. A sudden, powerful jolt went through me. I could step inside. I could finally see the space where she lived, the things she touched, and the air she breathed every day. It felt wrong, fundamentally violating, but it also felt necessary, an urgent, irresistible need. The rational part of my brain urged me to turn back, to respect the barrier of her personal space. But the perverse yearning, the deep, desperate need for connection and understanding, overpowered everything else within me. It pushed me forward with an undeniable force. My hand reached out, trembling uncontrollably, and hovered near the door. I pushed the door open a little wider. I checked the hallway, seeing it empty and silent. I slipped inside, closing the door softly behind me, plunging myself into her apartment and into the forbidden space. The air inside her apartment felt different, carrying a faint scent of lemon and something else, something uniquely hers. The air inside her apartment felt different, carrying a subtle scent of lemon and something uniquely hers. My fingers traced the cool ceramic of a small bird figurine on a shelf. I looked at a vibrant painting on the wall, filled with colors I had never considered. My gaze drifted across her furniture, a sturdy wooden chair, a low coffee table, each item placed with purpose. This was her space, a world previously imagined now made real around me. My heart thrummed with a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. I was finally here, breathing the air she breathed, seeing the things she saw. I walked further into the living room, my steps light on the polished floorboards. I saw a half-read book resting face down on the table. A small glass of water stood beside it. I longed to pick up the book, to touch the pages she had touched, to read the words she had read. The urge to connect was overwhelming. Then, a sudden metallic click echoed from the direction of the front door. My body froze. The sound of a key in the lock ripped through the stillness. My stomach plummeted. The door began to open, slowly, a sliver of light expanding into the room. She was back. I had been too careless, too absorbed. There was no time to escape. Panic seized me, a cold, sharp claw gripping my chest. I scrambled backwards, pressing myself against the wall, hoping to merge with the shadows. She stepped inside, her face tired from the day. She closed the door behind her, plunging the room into dimness. Then she turned, her eyes adjusting to the low light. Her gaze swept across the room and stopped on me. Her eyes widened, losing all their calm. A gasp started in her throat, a choked sound of pure shock and fear. "No, please," I whispered, my voice cracked, barely audible. My hands shot out, not to harm, but to stop the sound, to explain, to stop her from screaming. I needed her to understand. I needed to see. Her gasp became a choked cry, a raw sound of terror. She stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth. Her fear was a tangible presence, a wave pushing against me. My desperate attempts to make her understand only made her more afraid. She tried to dart past me, towards the door. My own panic intensified, a frantic storm inside my head. I could not let her go. I could not let her scream. They would hear. Everything would be over. I reached for her, my hands clumsy, driven by a desperate need to silence the sound, to stop her movement. My fingers closed around her arm, then her mouth, trying to muffle the coming scream. She struggled violently, twisting and pushing against me with surprising strength. Her eyes were wide with pure terror, staring into mine. We collided with the low coffee table. The glass of water tipped, spilling onto the polished wood. Her foot caught on the table's leg. She lost her balance, stumbling backwards. There was a sickening, sharp crack as her head hit the hard edge of the sturdy wooden table. Then there was only silence. Her body went limp in my grasp. My hands, still covering her mouth, felt the sudden cessation of her breathing, the stillness of her chest. I released her slowly, fearfully. She slid to the floor, her head at an unnatural angle, her eyes open, fixed on nothing. No movement, no breath. The spilled water spread a dark patch on the wood, reflecting the dim light. A small, dark pool began to form on the floor beside her head. My mind went blank, then filled with a blinding white noise. It was an accident. It was not intentional. I had only wanted to make her understand. I had only wanted her to stop screaming. My breath hitched in my throat. They would find me. They would know. My apartment was right next door. My eyes darted around her apartment, searching. I had to think. I had to act. The thought of anyone finding her, of anyone knowing, filled me with a fresh wave of terror. I could not leave her here. But I also could not leave her at all. A disturbing idea began to form, a twisted resolution to the closeness I had always desired. She would always be here now, with me. This was the only way to keep her. Permanently. This was the only way I could finally stop the distance between us. I looked at her, truly looked at her. Her face, once vibrant, now held a peaceful, motionless expression. She was finally quiet. The fear was gone from her eyes. My hand, still trembling, reached out to touch her cheek. Her skin was cool. I had to move her, carefully, meticulously. I needed to get her back to my apartment, to the place where I could keep her safe, keep her close. I scanned her living room one last time, checking for anything out of place. I wiped the small puddle of water from the table with my sleeve. I smoothed the rumpled rug. Then, with a chilling resolve, I lifted her. Her body was heavier than I expected, but my adrenaline gave me strength. I carried her out of her apartment, closing the door softly behind us. The hallway was empty, silent. I made the short, agonizing journey to my own apartment. I opened my door, stepped inside, and closed it again, sealing us both within the familiar, quiet shell of 3B. I would find a place for her, a hidden space. She would be mine now, forever. The distance was finally gone. I had achieved the closeness I always wanted. I woke again to quiet cries in the dead of night. The soft sound was a familiar disruption, reaching through the layers of sleep to pull me back to an unwelcome consciousness. A weary resignation settled deep within my chest, competing with the physical ache of my exhaustion. I clenched my eyes shut tightly, pulling the thick duvet higher over my ears, desperate for the world to simply fade away and leave me in peace. The quiet whimpers intensified, tearing through the brief illusion of calm I had tried to create. They grew desperate, then erupted into heart-wrenching wails that shredded the air in the dark room. The sound pounded against my last vestiges of will, a relentless invasion that made it impossible to remain still. My muscles stiffened with the effort of resistance, but the cries demanded a response. I pushed myself up, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. My bare feet found the cold floor with a familiar chill, and I stood slowly, my movements heavy and devoid of conscious thought. Each step felt predetermined, a sequence etched into my very being by countless repetitions. I shuffled forward, drawn by the raw, piercing agony of the wails, moving towards their origin in the room. I reached the small stand and lifted her carefully. I held her close against my chest, my arms supporting her familiar weight. Her small form fit perfectly within my embrace. I murmured into the darkness, "Mummy's here, baby, go back to sleep." I repeated the words slowly, a soft rhythmic comfort against my lips. The harsh wails began to soften, transforming into broken whimpers, then quieted entirely. A fragile peace settled around me, momentarily pushing back the exhaustion. This quiet felt hard-won, but carried a deep sorrow. I swayed gently from side to side, my eyes closed, holding her in the calm. I opened my eyes and turned towards the stand. My arms lowered, preparing to return her to her place. The glow of the nightlight fell upon the ornate urn I held. Its cold ceramic was in my hands. The name on the metal plate gleamed. It spelled out, "Lilies." I gently returned Lily's urn to its place on the stand. My arms lowered to my sides. I walked back to my bed, each step heavy. My body settled onto the mattress, and I pulled the duvet over me. Only my own breathing filled the room. A quiet sob escaped my throat, and tears tracked paths down my face. The quiet of the night settled around me, a cold, constant weight in the dark. I lay there, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling, utterly alone. My heart held an unyielding ache. This was my life now. The acceptance email arrived on a Tuesday morning, confirming my spot in the Dream Film program. My heart pounded as I read the letter twice. I ran downstairs to find my mother in the kitchen. Her face lit up when I told her. She clapped her hands, a joyful sound that filled the small kitchen. Then her eyes welled and she pulled me into a tight embrace. I felt her shoulders shake as she repeated her pride, her voice thick with emotion. Her tears were not just for happiness. They also acknowledged the distance that would soon separate us. Since Dad passed, it had always been just the two of us, our lives intertwined, built from shared meals, late-night talks, and unspoken understandings. This college acceptance was our dream, a future I had worked towards. Now it meant a cross-country move, an empty bedroom, and quiet evenings for her. "You did it, sweetheart," she said, pulling back and wiping her eyes. Her smile was wide, but deep sadness shadowed her eyes. "My girl will conquer the world." I smiled back. "We did it, Mom." The thought of leaving her alone tightened my chest. Her strength felt tied to my presence, to our daily rhythm. My excitement for a new life came with a persistent worry for her. The summer months dissolved into a blur of shopping lists and college dorm inventories. My mother meticulously orchestrated every detail of my departure, transforming our home into a staging ground for my new life. She insisted on accompanying me to every store, from department giants to small boutique shops, and her energy never wavered. We spent entire afternoons discussing the merits of various desk chairs and the precise shade of blue for my new bedding, always with her making the final selection. Her help started feeling more like a comprehensive takeover. When I suggested packing my comfortable old duvet, she quickly found a new hypoallergenic option online, citing health benefits I had never considered. My old belongings, sentimental treasures from childhood, were deemed unsuitable or simply unnecessary. She would smile, a bright, unwavering expression, while gently but firmly dismissing my choices. I often saw a quick tightening around her eyes, a flicker of something almost frustrated whenever I tried to assert an opinion or express a preference that strayed from her meticulously laid plans. She bought an expensive set of noise-canceling headphones, explaining they would keep me safe in a new city and ensure I could study without distraction. Then she purchased an advanced security camera for the dorm room, insisting it was essential for my protection, even after I told her dorms usually did not allow such things. Her reasons were always presented with loving concern, yet the insistence behind them became increasingly absolute. I began to sense a deeper struggle beneath her determined cheerfulness, a desperate clinging to control she could not voice directly. Her perfect smile masked a growing resistance to the idea of letting me go, a silent battle playing out in every choice she made. The car was packed, its engine running, signaling the impending journey. Just as I reached for the passenger door handle, my mother stopped me. She pointed to an old end table in the living room, a piece from my grandmother's house. My mother insisted it needed to go into the basement, saying it would be put away properly before we left. I followed her direction, stepping down the wooden stairs that led into the basement. I reached the bottom step. The door above me closed with a soft click, then a heavier sound followed as the deadbolt slid into place. A cold feeling spread through my stomach, replacing the earlier excitement. My mother's face appeared at the small window high in the door, her eyes shining with joy. Her wide smile held an unsettling contentment. "You are home now, sweetheart," she said. Her voice was light and musical. "You will never leave me." I turned, seeing the entire space was transformed. Soft carpet covered the floor. A patterned rug lay in its center. A comfortable bed with new bedding stood in one corner. Bookshelves full of my favorite authors lined the wall facing the stairs. A small desk with a computer sat ready beneath a new light fixture. A kitchenette occupied another wall, clean and bright. The air was warm and smelled of fresh paint. It was a small apartment, perfectly organized. It was my new room. The house at the end of Elm Street had held my attention for months because its porch light never turned off. Each evening, as darkness settled, that single bulb glowed steadily, disregarding the peeling paint and the yard's wild overgrowth. Neighbors offered only shrugs or vague comments about an old couple, gone but still paying the electric bill. The house appeared empty with its dark windows and drawn curtains. Still, the light remained a constant presence, creating an unsettling feeling, suggesting a hidden history beyond simple abandonment, and keeping my thoughts returning to it. On a cold December evening, the porch light above the house door flickered, then steadied itself. Moments later, the front door slowly swung inward, revealing a dark interior. A powerful sense of having just stepped out of that very room swept over me, a specific knowledge of its dimensions and temperature. It was a certain recognition, a remembered departure, even though I knew I had never actually set foot inside the building before. My hands burned. They ached from the brutal scrubbing against the raw wood of the floorboards. The rough, splintered surface beneath my palms was dark with stubborn, ingrained stains, demanding every ounce of my effort. My muscles screamed from the relentless labor, a physical memory of exertion that my mind could not recall. Each pass of the stiff brush scraped against more than just wood. It scraped against the smooth, slick memory of thick plastic. I remembered the weight, the dead, unyielding mass within the black bags. I had lifted them, grunting under the heavy burden of what they contained. The top of each bag was cinched tight, tied with precise knots, each twist locked with methodical exactitude. I had carefully secured them myself. My arms still remembered the strain, the chilling finality of the task. This was what I had needed to erase, what I had packaged with such meticulousness, and what my body now refused to let me forget. The open doorway of the house remained an entrance. Its shape was dark and rectangular, standing against the dim light within. I walked through the threshold again, my gaze landing on the black trash bags. They lay precisely where I had left them after the scrubbing. Their cinched tops showed the careful sealing. My arms remembered the exact strain as I lifted each one, the shift of weight within the plastic. I carried them out, one in each hand, and walked back towards my own vehicle. The street was empty. The air was still and cold. I placed them with care in the trunk, the dull thud echoing in the quiet night. I drove to the river. The road was a familiar path beneath the wheels. The water waited, dark and unmoving, reflecting only the distant streetlights. I pulled the bags from the trunk. Their combined weight felt solid in my grip. I walked to the edge of the bank, the coarse grass crunching under my shoes. With a deliberate movement, I pushed the first bag into the cold current. It dipped below the surface without a splash. The river took it. The second bag followed, absorbed by the dark water, vanishing into the flowing current. The river flowed on, undisturbed, carrying its new burdens downstream. Back inside my own house, a calm began to settle over me. I turned on the bright kitchen light and started the coffee machine, watching the dark liquid drip into the pot. The sound was a steady rhythm. I stripped off my clothes, then stepped into the warm spray of the shower, letting the water wash over my skin. I scrubbed, rinsing away the scent of river water and the memory of the cold night air. Dressed in clean clothes, I poured myself a cup of hot coffee and sat at the kitchen table. The morning newspaper lay folded there. Its headlines spoke of distant, unrelated concerns. I scanned the columns, reading each word, trying to absorb the ordinary details of the world. I felt a quiet satisfaction. A strange lightness settled in my chest. A great weight had finally lifted. I took another sip of coffee, and the warmth spread through me. Everything felt normal once more, restored to its proper place. But then, as I turned a page, a fleeting thought disturbed the quiet order. I felt a sudden, sharp awareness of whatever I had missed. The message arrived at dawn. "Come home, I need you." It was terse, unpunctuated. A blunt command from a woman I had not spoken to in years. My stomach clenched into a hard knot, a familiar physical response to her name, her voice, even her fragmented words on a screen. The house exerted an invisible pull, its presence causing a physical ache in my chest. I fought it for hours, pacing my small apartment, the terror of returning constricting my throat. Each argument I made against going felt weak, against the certainty that I had no choice. She demanded, and I still obeyed, even after all this time. This was my life's oldest law. The drive passed in a blur of highway and growing dread. The landscape changed, turning from cultivated fields to wilder woods. Each familiar bend in the road tightened my muscles. I saw the old oak tree by Miller's Creek, its twisted branches. A memory flashed, my small body pressed against its rough bark, my mother's sharp voice close, her hand gripping my arm. I pushed the image down. It left a bitter taste in my mouth, and I felt fear. The sun began to dip, casting long shadows across the road. Every mile brought the house closer, its image growing, terrifying me anew. I pictured the peeling paint, the darkened windows, the way the front porch sagged on one side. I remembered the feeling of small hands scrubbing at imaginary dirt, the sting of soap in my eyes. The details were clear, too clear, despite years of trying to erase them. My old car rattled onto the gravel drive. The house stood exactly as I remembered it, a shadow against the fading light. It was smaller than my adult mind recalled, but its immense presence crushed me. My breath caught in my throat. I saw the upstairs window where I used to hide, pulling the thin curtain back just enough to watch the street. The old shame pricked my skin, remembering how I would flinch at every raised voice, every sudden movement. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. This place was wood and brick. It held every scream, every slammed door, every tight, desperate breath I had taken as a child. It was filled with buried terror, and I was stepping back inside. The front door opened before I reached it. My mother stood in the frame. She was a thin woman, smaller than I remembered. Her hair had been dark. It was now pale gray against her gaunt face. Her eyes, however, held the same intense stare, a gaze that exposed my every weakness. She looked frail, but the feeling she evoked was not pity. It was a chilling awareness, a familiar sense of being scrutinized, judged. She did not speak. I did not speak. We stood there, two figures bound by an unspoken history. The house a silent, watchful presence. The air tightened around me, carrying the metallic scent of old blood. I wanted to turn, to run, but my feet felt fixed to the cracked concrete porch. The house had swallowed me once again. The dinner table was set for two, just as it had always been. A thin layer of dust coated the dark wood, untouched by the meal itself. The plates held bland, overcooked chicken and limp green beans, the same sort of food she had always prepared. We sat opposite each other, the table an expanse of strained air between us. My mother did not eat much. Her fork pushed food around her plate, a nervous, repetitive motion. My own stomach felt tight, knotted with a fear that made eating impossible. I watched her, my eyes tracing the lines on her face, the way her hand trembled slightly as she lifted her glass of water. She avoided my gaze, looking instead at a point just past my shoulder, as if an invisible third person occupied the space behind me. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the quiet house, each second stretching the silence into an unbearable pressure. I cleared my throat, a small, involuntary sound. She flinched, a quick, jerky movement. Her head snapped toward me, her eyes wide. Then she looked away again, her gaze falling to her plate. A blush crept up her neck, staining her pale skin. Her breathing became shallow and fast. I had seen her like this before, but always when she was angry, when the tension coiled in her before she struck. This was different. This was a fear I recognized, a mirror of my own. It unnerved me more than her anger ever could. She took a deep breath, a shaky intake of air. Her fingers gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. "I have to say something," she whispered, her voice barely audible. It was a hoarse, broken sound. I waited. My heart started to beat faster, a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I did not know what to expect. She had never apologized. She had never acknowledged anything. My mind raced, searching for possibilities. Was she ill? Was she asking for money? Every scenario felt inadequate. She swallowed hard. Her voice gained a fraction of strength, though it still vibrated with an inner trembling. I was a terrible mother. The words hung in the air, blunt and unexpected. They hit me with a physical force, knocking the breath from my lungs. My entire body went still. I stared at her, unable to form a response, unable to believe what I had heard. "I hurt you," she continued, her gaze finally meeting mine, full of a raw, desperate pain. "I hurt you very much, and I am so sorry." Her eyes filled with tears, a slow stream tracing paths down her weathered cheeks. She did not sob. She just sat there, tears falling, her face etched with a suffering I had never seen before. My mind reeled. This was not the mother I knew. This was not the woman who had wielded her anger like a weapon. This was a broken stranger confessing to a past she had always denied. The admission felt like a breach in the very fabric of my world, shaking loose years of carefully constructed defenses. "I hated myself for it," she said, her voice catching. "I still hate myself. Every single day. I looked at you, my child, and I saw something beautiful. But then something else would take over. Something dark. It felt like a current, a rage that flowed through me, a separate thing. It pushed me, compelled me. I saw myself doing it from a distance, like watching someone else. But it was me. It was my hand. It was my voice. I could not stop it." Her confession laid bare a terrifying vulnerability. It also revealed a disturbing lack of self-control, a sense of being possessed by an external force. Her words painted a picture of a mind fractured, a woman tormented by her own actions, yet claiming a strange distance from them. I listened, my shock deepening into a cold dread. The idea of an external anger was unsettling. It did not excuse her actions, but it colored them with a new, terrifying shade. She continued, her voice gaining a desperate urgency. "I tried to fight it. I did. But it was stronger than me. It would well up inside, a burning hot thing, and then I would lash out. And afterwards, the shame, the guilt, it was crushing. I would promise myself I would never do it again. But it always came back. It always did." Her gaze was fixed on me, pleading for some understanding, some acknowledgement of her torment. But I only felt the weight of her words, the crushing reality of what she was admitting. All the years of fear, the ingrained patterns of flinching and hiding, the endless terror, were suddenly confirmed by the architect of that terror. The raw truth of her confession felt like a blow. It did not erase the past. It did not lessen the scars. It simply validated the horror I had lived through. I sat frozen, grappling with this new, unsettling image of my mother, a woman who claimed to be a victim of her own rage. The unexpected shift in her demeanor, the sudden unveiling of her own pain, left me completely exposed and reeling. Her confession settled in my stomach, a cold, hard stone. It validated the terror I had lived through, but it did not make the terror disappear. The raw truth of her admission did not ease the old pain. It amplified it, bringing every suppressed memory to the surface, sharp and vivid. I looked at her, at the tears on her face, the desperate pleading in her eyes. My own voice felt thick, clogged with years of unsaid things. I lived in fear, I said, the words a quiet current in the room. I heard my own voice, steady but distant, as if someone else spoke through me. Every day was a tightrope walk. Every sound, every shadow, every shift in your mood. I watched for the anger to erupt. I learned to anticipate it, to make myself small, to disappear. The memory of hiding under my bed, my breath held tight in my chest, was suddenly immediate. I remembered the dull ache of my muscles from constant tension, the way my heart beat like a trapped bird. That was my childhood. A constant state of waiting for the next blow, the next scream. I saw the suffering etched on her face, the torment she described. I did not doubt her words about the burning rage, the feeling of something taking over. I recognized the fractured truth in her voice. It was a new perspective, unsettling. It was a terrifying reality, for her and for me, that her actions felt separate from her. But understanding her pain did not erase mine. It did not mend the broken pieces of my past. You speak of hate, I continued, my gaze steady on hers. You hated yourself. I knew nothing of that. I only knew what you did. I knew the hands, the voice, the fear. I knew the way my body learned to flinch even when no strike came. That fear became part of me. It is still part of me. I felt the familiar tension return to my shoulders, the slight tremor in my own hand. It defines how I walk in the world, how I trust, how I do not trust. She reached a hand across the table, her fingers trembling slightly as they stretched toward me. "Can you forgive me?" she whispered, her voice fragile. "Please. I want to be better. I have always wanted to be better." Her eyes were wide, brimming with a desperate hope I had never seen there before. It was a direct plea, a demand for absolution I could not give. The word forgive felt like ash in my mouth. It felt like a betrayal of the small, terrified child I had been. It felt like an erasure of every scar, every night of quiet tears. I could not offer her forgiveness. The path to healing was not simple. It was not a single word, a single act. It was a slow, agonizing crawl through fractured memories, and I was not ready to begin that journey with her. I knew I might never be ready. "I cannot," I said, my voice quiet but firm. I watched her hand retract slowly, as if hit by an invisible force. Her face crumpled. The hope left her eyes, replaced by a deep, aching despair. We sat there, two figures at a table, raw and exposed. The damage was acknowledged. It was not repaired. It was not erased. It was simply laid bare between us. "Please," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "Give me a chance. Let me try. I can be different. I know I can." The sound of her plea was a key turning in a lock, releasing a flood of old fear. I remembered the tightening of my stomach when she used those words, the careful hope that had always been shattered. A cold wave washed over me. Her request was a siren song, pulling me back to every promise she had made and broken. The child in me, the one who had hidden in corners, screamed a silent warning. My breath caught in my throat. I remembered the sting of her hand, the quick, sharp pain, the crushing weight of disappointment. I remembered how quickly different had always vanished. The bedroom was exactly as I had left it. A single bed, too small for my adult frame, stood against the wall. The wallpaper, faded yellow with tiny, chipped flowers, curled at the edges. A worn teddy bear sat on the pillow, its button eye missing. I had tried to escape this room for years, to forget its dimensions, its smells, the particular quality of light that filtered through the thin curtains. Now I was back inside its familiar box, and the walls seemed to press in on me. The air felt thin, difficult to breathe. I paced the small space, my bare feet silent on the cold wooden floor. Every step brought a fresh wave of anxiety, a tightening in my chest. I sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress sinking under my weight. The springs groaned a familiar protest. I could feel the ghost of my younger self here, a small, curled figure always trying to be invisible. My muscles remembered the tension, the defensive posture, the way I used to shrink into myself. My shoulders hunched, my arms wrapped around my middle, a protective gesture I had not made in years. The knot in my stomach tightened, a cold, hard stone pressing against my diaphragm. The room was cold despite the closed windows. A deep chill settled into my bones, an ancient cold that seeped from the very walls. Sleep did not come. My mind raced, replaying the conversation with my mother, her confession, my refusal to forgive. Each thought brought a fresh surge of nausea. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, at the faint water stain shaped like a twisted hand. My eyes traced its outline, a meaningless shape that suddenly held a sinister meaning. My skin crawled. I felt a prickling sensation on my left forearm, a sharp, specific itch. I rubbed it absently, then looked down. My breath hitched. A dark, wet stain bloomed on the pale fabric of my shirt sleeve. It was small at first, a pinprick of crimson. My mind refused to process it. I pushed the sleeve up, my hand shaking. Below my elbow, where an old, deep scar from a jagged wound had long since faded to a silvery line, a fresh, dark cut had opened. A thin stream of blood seeped from it, tracing a bright red path down my arm. It was not a fresh injury. It was the scar itself, torn open, weeping blood onto my skin. Panic seized me, a cold, gripping hand around my throat. I sat bolt upright, staring at my arm. The wound was old, years old, a relic of a forgotten fall, a clumsy child's accident. I remembered the sharp pain, the tears, my mother's harsh scolding as she cleaned it. But it was not forgotten. The memory was suddenly vivid, searing. I touched the bleeding line with a trembling finger. The blood was warm, slick, real. It pulsed faintly, a tiny, horrifying heartbeat on my arm. I ripped my sleeve higher, frantic. Other scars, fainter, older marks from childhood bumps and scrapes, from times my mother's hand had been too rough or a discarded toy too sharp, seemed to darken, to stand out with a new prominence. One on my wrist, a thin white line from a shattered glass, appeared to deepen. Another on my shoulder, a pale streak from a slammed door, felt like it throbbed with a dull ache. My body was betraying me, turning its old injuries into new wounds. I stood, stumbling back from the bed, my arm outstretched, dripping red onto the wooden floor. The sight of my own blood from a wound that should have been forever healed sent a wave of dizziness through me. The house felt alive around me, its old wood groaning, its plaster breathing. This room, this place, had always been a source of pain. Now it felt like it was actively reaching out, making my past trauma a physical, present reality. The fear was absolute, complete. I did not understand. My mind struggled, fractured, trying to comprehend what was happening, what this meant for my body, for my sanity. The blood continued to flow, a dark, undeniable truth. My name is unimportant now. It was once, but that feeling faded with so many other human things. I collect debts, not money or favors from mortals, but true obligations owed by entities existing beyond the world's known boundaries, beings whose names are ancient whispers and whose power reshapes reality without effort. My employer, Ashmedai, found me when I was just a person, living a quiet life, completely unprepared for the world he opened before me. He told me I possessed a unique aptitude, a certain pliability for this work. I believed him because I had no choice. The first few collections were terrifying, a brutal immersion into an existence I could not have imagined. I learned to navigate spaces that twisted perception and to speak a language that was more sensation than sound. I learned to survive. The survival changed me. A direct confrontation with a creature from the outer dark, one that devoured light and sanity, left me scarred in ways no blade could manage. I remember the tearing sensation as my mind stretched, contorted, then somehow knitted itself back together, stronger but different. After that, I noticed things. The world acquired new dimensions. I could taste the residual emotions lingering in a centuries-old room, a metallic tang of fear, a sweet warmth of forgotten joy. Colors deepened, pulsed with energies I had never perceived before. The air itself held textures, currents that shifted with unseen presences. I began to hear frequencies far beyond human range, a constant symphony of existence that sometimes overwhelmed my thoughts. This was not a gift, it was an intrusion, a constant barrage of information my old self could not have processed. My body adapted too, slowly, subtly. Skin that once tore easily now resisted lacerations that should have killed me. Bones mended with impossible speed, knitting themselves back into place within hours of a catastrophic break. There was a time I shattered my arm against a materialized thought form, a jagged shard of pure malice, and by the end of the day, I could move my fingers with only a dull ache. My eyes, once a simple brown, now sometimes held a strange luminescence in the dark, reflecting light with an eerie efficiency. People noticed. They gave me wide berths. I learned to avoid mirrors, finding the reflection unsettling, almost foreign. The changes were not always visible, but they were always present, a constant reminder of the things I had endured. The most disturbing aspect of my transformation involved memories. Sometimes, when a collection was particularly close, or when I stood in the presence of a truly ancient entity, fragments of experience that were not mine would surface in my mind. A flash of a world burning, not our world but another, light years away. The overwhelming sorrow of a being watching its star fade. The cold calculations of something that had predated organic life. These were not visions, they were raw impressions, sensations, and thoughts that permeated my consciousness, leaving echoes of alien lives behind. I began to lose track of which memories were truly my own. My personal history blurred, overshadowed by the vastness of others' pasts. My humanity felt like a thin veneer over something far older, far more expansive, growing within me. I survived encounters that should have obliterated me. A psychic assault that fractured the minds of others left me with only a temporary ringing in my ears. A physical attack from a being composed of compressed shadow, which tore steel like paper, merely bruised my ribs and left me breathless. Each impossible survival solidified the shift within me. I was no longer merely human. I was something more durable, more attuned, more porous. The world of mortal concerns, of human ambitions and fears, began to recede. It seemed small, insignificant. My perspectives widened, encompassing scales of time and existence that previously would have shattered my understanding. I became an observer of humanity, an entity moving among them, yet no longer truly one of them. The profound internal change was complete. I was Ashmedai's collector, an evolving instrument, forever changed by the debts I pursued. The person I once was had been left behind, shed like an old skin, replaced by something stranger, something cold and resilient. The next summons came as a cold whisper in my mind, a direct thought from Ashmedai that bypassed my ears entirely. Eternal. The name held a taste of forgotten stars, a vibration that resonated deep in the altered parts of my being. Even my changed self felt a flicker of something close to dread. This was no petty godling or dimension-spanning merchant. Eternal was a fundamental constant, a devourer of epics, a presence that preceded the very concept of time for many civilizations. The debt it owed was a stain on the ledger, an anomaly that had defied collection for millennia. Ashmedai offered no explanation, no strategy. He gave only a single resonant command: collect. Z. The journey led me to a place that maps did not chart, a wound in the earth hidden beneath the shifting ice of a polar continent. I found the entrance not by sight, but by the gravitational pull of something ancient and immense beneath, a distortion in reality itself. A fissure opened into the rock, jagged and black, swallowing the pale Arctic light. The air grew still as I stepped inside, the biting cold of the surface giving way to an oppressive warmth, thick with the scent of ozone and something organic and old. The passage descended steeply, a spiral carved from stone that seemed to writhe, its surfaces slick with an unknown ichor that glowed with an internal phosphorescence. My enhanced senses were assaulted. The stones pulsed with slow, deep currents of energy, a constant pressure against my skin. I heard the grinding of tectonic plates far below, the slow churn of molten rock, and beyond that, a deeper vibration, the actual pulse of Ithnal. It was a sound that shook my bones, not through volume, but through sheer omnipresence. The walls were covered in glyphs, not etched but grown, organic patterns that shifted and reformed as I passed. They whispered in a language of concepts, not words, pouring directly into my mind, forgotten histories, cosmic geometries, the agonizing entropy of dying universes. My mind, now more resilient, stretched to accommodate these intrusions, processing the information without shattering. I descended for what felt like days, though time lost meaning in that place. The passage widened into vast caverns, each larger than any city, supported by pillars that rose into blackness, impossibly immense. Strange flora grew here, bioluminescent fungi that mimicked constellations, their caps glowing with cold fire. I passed great fissures in the rock where lightless abysses plunged deeper still, revealing the raw, unshaped bedrock of the planet, scarred by ancient forces. The warmth intensified, becoming a pervasive heat that radiated from the very ground. Then the tunnel narrowed again, leading to a single massive chamber, the air within it thick with a palpable tension, a presence that made the atmosphere vibrate. The chamber was circular, impossibly vast, its ceiling lost in shadow. In the center, a colossal form rested, Ithnal. It was not a creature of flesh and blood, nor of stone or energy. It was a confluence, a shifting mass of concepts given form. Tendrils of obsidian shadow reached out from a central core that pulsed with a deep, violet light like a dying star. These tendrils did not move. They simply existed in different positions simultaneously, an impossible knot of time and space. Parts of its surface were covered in what appeared to be eyes, unblinking orbs of myriad sizes and colors, each reflecting a different reality, a different age. Other parts bore chitinous plates that clicked together with the sound of grinding planets. It simply was an absolute statement of existence. Its presence filled the chamber, crushing my thoughts, pressing down on my spirit. Even my altered form, accustomed to entities that defied mortal comprehension, felt diminished. I stood before it, a minuscule vessel facing an ocean that predated all shores. I extended my mind, projecting Ashmedai's mark, the symbol of the debt. Ithnal responded, not with words, but with an immense, dispassionate wave of understanding that crashed into my consciousness. The debt was immense, a cosmic obligation of such scale that no material payment, no ancient artifact, no energy signature could ever satisfy it. It was a debt of experience, of sensation, of subjective reality that Ithnal, in its boundless, detached existence, lacked. A single thought, clear and resonant, emerged from the confluence of Ithnal's presence. You are porous. You taste of life. You have seen much through mortal eyes. Give me a day. My blood ran cold despite the chamber's heat. Ithnal wanted to inhabit my senses, to perceive the world through my perspective for 24 hours. It wanted to experience the delicate dance of light, the nuance of a passing breeze, the fleeting pangs of hunger, the intricate weave of human emotion. It sought a connection to the vibrant, chaotic world it merely observed from its ancient prison. This was the payment. This was the only possible payment. The thought of it sent a jolt of terror through me, a sensation I had not felt with such intensity since my early, more human days. Allowing Ithnal to peer through my eyes was one thing, but to truly experience connects the world through me, to link its consciousness with mine, risked everything. My sanity, already stretched and reknitted countless times, would be exposed to its primordial vastness. My humanity, that last fragile shell clinging to my core, would be utterly vulnerable. What would remain of me after an entity older than gods walked in my skin, however briefly? What parts of its terrifying essence might remain embedded in my being? I could become a mere echo, a broken vessel, forever tainted. But the debt had to be paid. Ashmedai's command resonated with an undeniable force. The ledger demanded balance. There was no other option, no other currency. I had been changed for this work, made durable, made pliable, made to survive the impossible. This was the impossible. My desperate, dangerous choice stared me down. I inhaled the thick, ancient air, a process that felt alien and distant even to myself. The survival instinct, honed by countless brushes with oblivion, warred with a deep, lingering echo of self-preservation. This was a risk that might finally consume the last vestiges of who I was. I met Ithnal's silent, multifaceted gaze. My resolve hardened, a cold, metallic taste in my mouth. For one day, I projected back, my thought voice firm despite the trembling fear deep within my altered mind. Through my eyes, through my senses, 24 hours, then the debt is settled. Ithnal did not move, but the violet light at its core pulsed brighter. A single, unseen tendril of its being reached out, not touching me physically, but merging with my consciousness. The world spun. My vision blurred, then sharpened, taking on new depths, new perspectives. A sudden rush of immense, cold understanding flowed into me, alongside a dizzying, alien curiosity. I felt my own thoughts begin to intertwine with something vast and ancient, something utterly alien, yet now profoundly intimate. The world outside the chamber, the world of mortals, awaited its new temporary observer. The payment had begun. My humanity, what little remained, was now on the line. I stood there, a bridge between two incomprehensible realities, praying something of me would remain when Ithnal departed. Ithnal's presence receded suddenly. The immense, cold understanding withdrew from my mind, leaving a hollowness where a cosmic awareness had briefly resided. My senses, though still altered, felt dulled and muted, as if Nal's perception overwhelmed them. The world, returned to its normal strange state, seemed insignificant. I stood in the vast chamber. Violet light dimmed. Ithnal faded into its own existence. The payment was complete. The debt was settled. I made my way out. The spiral passage and glowing ichor held a residue of Ithnal's presence, an echo of its passage. The journey back to Ashmedai's domain was a blur of distant sensations. Ashmedai awaited me, as always, in the flickering shadow of his study. He did not speak. His ancient eyes bore into me, assessing the changes. "The debt is paid," I stated, my voice rough. "Indeed," Ashmedai replied, his tone dry and detached. "A remarkable feat of endurance. You always survive, don't you? A true testament to your unique resilience." An unusual emphasis on resilience carried an undertone I had never heard. He watched me, a subtle smile touching his lips. It was not approval, but calculation. "You seem more integrated now," he observed, his gaze lingering. "The Eternal experience appears to have refined your capacities." An interesting development. His words chilled me more than the polar wastes. They implied a purpose beyond simple debt collection, a deliberate shaping, a design. My role felt less like an employee and more like a tool, sharpened with each dangerous task. This was not the first time he had hinted at my unusual nature. After Eternal, the implications struck with renewed force. I felt a growing disquiet, a feeling of manipulation, not by circumstance, but by him. I left Ashmedai's presence with new resolve. He withheld truths, avoiding my questions. I knew someone else might provide answers, someone Ashmedai sometimes consulted. He consulted her with caution. Miriam Ashford. She was an archivist and a scholar of arcane lore. She operated from a secluded library in a forgotten city district. Her knowledge of ancient entities and their interactions with mortals was legendary. Locating her was difficult. It required following obscure leads through forgotten texts and coded messages. The need for understanding drove me. I found Miriam in a room stacked high with scrolls and tomes that vibrated with quiet energy. She was older than she appeared. Her eyes showed a wisdom gathered over centuries. She offered me a seat, observing me with an intensity rivaling Ashmedai's. "Eternal," she stated, a knowing affirmation. "You bear its mark now, a potent experience." "Ashmedai speaks of my resilience," I began. I cut to the core. "He calls me integrated. What exactly am I, Miriam? What is this transformation?" Miriam leaned forward, her gaze piercing. "You are a conduit," she revealed, her voice quiet yet firm. "A very rare phenomenon. Most mortals, exposed to the sheer energy and consciousness of beings like Eternal, would simply disintegrate. Their minds would shatter. Their forms would undo. They lack the intrinsic framework to contain such power." "But I survive," I pressed. "You do," she affirmed. "You possess a unique capacity to channel immense, alien energies without immediate self-destruction. Your body and mind adapt, yes, but not like a normal being evolves. They are remade. They are restructured to accommodate the input. You are not simply enduring these encounters. You are absorbing them. You are becoming a vessel for powers that would obliterate others, allowing realities to pass through you." Her words resonated with a cold, horrifying truth. They explained the impossible survivals. They explained the rapid healing. They explained the shared memories. They explained the evolving senses. I was not merely an instrument. "Ashmedai," I stated. The name made my mouth feel bitter. "He knew." "Of course he knew," Miriam confirmed, a trace of sorrow in her voice. "He does not choose his collectors by chance. He seeks those with latent abilities. He seeks those who can be shaped. You were chosen because you had the potential to be what you have become, a collector who does not just retrieve debts. You process and channel the very essence of the collection itself. He uses you to maintain the balance, yes, but also to explore the limits of what a mortal form can contain and transmit. You are a living experiment." The revelation hit me with a force greater than any psychic assault. Ashmedai had not merely hired me, he had cultivated me. He had orchestrated my transformation. He pushed me to the brink of annihilation, knowing I would return changed, stronger, and more capable of handling the next, more dangerous task. My entire journey, every difficult encounter, every agonizing shift in my being had been by his design, a deliberate process of weaponization. The true cost of my survival unfolded before me. It was not just the loss of my humanity, but the deliberate theft of it, piece by piece, by an employer who saw me as a highly specialized, self-adapting tool. My resilience was not a gift, but a curated trait, a capacity for extreme absorption and channeling. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice flat. "You continue to survive," Miriam said, her eyes holding a deep concern. "And you fight. You fight to retain what remains of you. The more you channel, the more difficult it becomes to distinguish your own self from the forces you contain. Ashmedai will not stop using you until you break. He will use you until you become something entirely different, something he cannot control." A cold resolve grew within me. Ashmedai had built me and instilled within me a will to survive. That will burned with a new, dangerous purpose. I would no longer simply collect debts. I would understand my true nature. I would master the forces within me. I would confront the architect of my transformation. The fight was not just for survival. It was for reclamation and the defiant assertion of my own being against the cosmic currents Ashmedai sought to wield through me. He had shown me the edges of existence. I would show him the true power of a being forged in the crucible of his own manipulations. Buddy bit the neighbor's child, and animal control arrived at my door. I watched them lead him away from the yard, his leash pulled tight, and dread grew inside me. The officer spoke of consequences, using words like quarantines and euthanasia. My stomach twisted at the thought of losing him. A world without Buddy impossible to consider. Then the officer offered an alternative, a new program. He explained it was privately funded and experimental, focused on behavioral modification for difficult animals. He promised it was a chance for Buddy, a way to avoid the worst outcome. I listened, desperate for any solution that did not involve saying goodbye to my dog forever. The officer assured me the cost was covered, and past participants showed high success. I signed the papers without a second thought, clutching the hope of Buddy's return. They told me he would be back within a week. Changed. 6 days later, a familiar van pulled up my driveway, and Buddy emerged, walking on his own leash, handed over by a new officer. He looked like my Buddy, same golden fur, same floppy ears, but when I called his name, no tail wagged. He made no sound, not a happy bark, not a soft whine. From the moment I woke up that next morning, his gaze was on me, unblinking. When I moved from the bed to the bathroom, his head turned, tracking my path. I found myself checking over my shoulder often, just to confirm he was still watching. My morning routine began. I went to the kitchen for coffee, and he rose, walking silently behind me. I prepared breakfast, and he sat at my feet, perfectly still, his eyes fixed on my movements. He did not beg for food. He did not drink from his water bowl I had refilled. I ate my toast, and he remained unmoving, watching every bite I took. Later, when I settled on the couch with a book, he walked into the living room and positioned himself directly across from me. He sat upright, his back straight, his head slightly tilted, mirroring my own posture. He simply watched the book in my hands. I moved to the window, looking out at the yard, and he moved too, standing behind me, looking out at the same view. Every shift in my position, every movement of my body, was met with a precise, immediate replication of his own. It was a precise, unnerving dance, choreographed by my own unwitting actions. I felt a growing unease in my own home. His quiet observance offered no comfort. I woke suddenly in the deep darkness of my bedroom. A rhythmic snick and a brief scrape had pulled me from sleep. The sounds came from the kitchen, persistent and unsettling, echoing through the quiet night. A chill dread seeped into my bones, replacing the warmth of my blankets. I lay still, straining to identify the source, my breath held tight in my chest. The deliberate, methodical rhythm of the sounds raised goosebumps on my arms. I pushed the covers back and swung my legs off the bed, my bare feet finding the cold floor. The house felt strangely colder than usual. The air itself seemed to press around me. I walked slowly towards the kitchen, each step silent on the carpeted hallway. The snicker and scrape-ache grew clearer with every pace, each sound distinct now, the metallic ring of steel against stone. I reached the threshold of the kitchen doorway and peered around the frame. The moon cast long shadows through the window, painting the room in shades of gray. A figure stood at the counter, silhouetted against the pale light. It was too tall for Buddy on 4 legs, too slender for me to mistake it for anything else. My breath caught in my throat. It stood upright, just as a person would. One of his paws grasped the handle of my largest kitchen knife. The blade reflected the dim light. He was carefully scraping it against the whetstone I kept by the sink, the source of the repetitive snick and scrape that had woken me. He was sharpening the knife. I could only stare, frozen in terror. He stopped his movement, his head slowly turning. His dark eyes met mine, unwavering and empty. A sound began in his throat, a guttural rasp. It stretched, twisting into something that almost formed words, but not truly. Hello. The sound clawed its way out of his mouth, a horrifying, strained imitation of my own voice, distorted and raw. Each syllable grated against my ears, chilling me to the bone. It was my voice, but broken, warped, stripped of all warmth and humanity. Slowly, he stepped towards me, the knife still clutched in his paw, the blade pointing forward. Didyousleepwell. The memory of his stretched, broken voice burned into my mind. I scrambled backward, tripping over my own feet, desperate to get away from the standing figure in the dim kitchen. He remained fixed in the doorway, the knife still pointing. I stumbled into the living room, fled up the stairs, my heart pounding against my ribs. I slammed my bedroom door shut and twisted the lock, leaning against the cold wood, gasping for air. My phone lay on the nightstand. My fingers fumbled for it, needing to call someone to explain this impossible horror. But the words stuck in my throat. How could I describe a dog sharpening a knife and speaking my voice? Who would believe me? A deliberate scratching began at the door, a gentle tap, tap, tap of a single paw. I froze, listening. Then, a drawn-out sound, not a bark, but a careful syllable. O-P-E-N. It grated. A whisper that was too loud, too human. I pressed my back harder against the door, tears streaming down my face. My phone felt like a dead weight. No one would believe me. Days blurred into a terrifying routine. He watched me eat, sitting at the table opposite my chair, holding a fork in one paw, though he never brought it to his mouth. He would sit on the sofa, seemingly reading the newspaper, turning the pages with careful movements. His eyes, always on me, were now less fixed, more observant, sometimes even mimicking human curiosity. I would hear him walking downstairs at night, the soft thump-thump-thump of his bipedal steps, sometimes accompanied by the clink of metal in the kitchen. I never dared to check. The house became a cage, every room holding his presence even when he was not physically there. I spoke to myself in hushed tones, fearing he would learn more of my vocal patterns. He began to anticipate my needs, opening doors before I reached them, bringing me things I had just thought of needing. His movements were precise, human. His body seemed to lengthen, his paws losing some of their former canine roundness. The fur around his face receded in places, revealing taut skin beneath. He was not just mimicking me, he was becoming something else entirely, something growing more like me with each passing, dreadful hour. My world had shrunk to the walls of my home, a prison shared with a creature that wore Buddy's skin but was not Buddy, and was slowly becoming me. My gut twisted, a familiar knot tightening just beneath my ribs. A cold, dread certainty pushed against my breath. The old mime sent its signal deep into my bones. I knew that sensation, a warning from a town that held its secrets deep. I stood by the window, watching the gray morning light spill over the rooftops. The air carried wood smoke and damp earth, a comfort that intensified the unease. The dispatch radio crackled, breaking the station house quiet. Engine 1. Structure fire. Abandoned mine shaft 3. Possible ignition. My partner, Frank, his face showing the weariness of 100 such calls, moved towards the truck. We did not speak. There was no need for words for this. This was our accepted ritual, performed with a grim understanding that went beyond routine. I pulled on my gear, the heavy fabric and cold metal a second skin. Each strap, each buckle, felt like a silent confirmation of purpose. The drive to the mine was short, the truck rumbling over the uneven road. The town clung to us with dark trees and quiet houses, always watching. The mine entrance gaped, a black maw in the hillside. Cold air poured from it even on a warm day, a cold that penetrated my bones. We moved with deliberate steps, our boots crunching on loose rock. The equipment felt heavier. The feeling of being watched intensified the deeper we went. It was a deep chill, a sense of eyes that followed our every move from the shadows. Everyone knew the tales of people who walked into these tunnels and simply ceased to exist, leaving only the question of where they had gone. We found the smoke, a thin plume curling from a collapsed shaft. It was not a huge fire, never was, but it always required a response, an acknowledgement of the mine's persistent demands. We set up the hoses, our headlamps cutting through the gloom. The air grew thicker with the acrid smell of burning timber and something else, a damp, metallic scent that always accompanied these events. My hands moved by themselves, trained and efficient. My gaze drifted towards the darker recesses of the tunnels, searching for something I could never define. The town allowed us this abnormal existence, a life dependent on these low-level threats, a reminder of what lay beneath our feet. We existed within its quiet demands. Another call came later that week. A car accident on Elm Street, an impact that left the vehicles dented. Yet the scene held a gruesome spectacle, one that stayed with you. A woman sat slumped in the passenger seat, blood streaming from a wound on her head, her face pale and still. Her eyes stared forward, wide, holding no flicker of fear or distress. She breathed, a shallow gasp, but made no sound. The driver of the other car stood beside his vehicle, one arm bent at an angle. Bone showed where the skin had ripped open. He just watched us work, a slight smile on his lips. Neither of them screamed. They did not even whimper when the paramedics moved them onto stretchers. The blood on the asphalt, the twisted metal, the broken bodies, all felt like a regular occurrence, observed by the few onlookers with a similar detachment. Their faces showed a tired understanding, not shock. We cleaned it up, patched the wounds we could, and moved on. This town had seen worse, and it always would. There was no point in dwelling on it. The river, normally a slow-moving body of water winding through town, could turn violent without warning. One spring afternoon, a cloudburst upstream sent a surge of water rushing down the valley. The siren blared, a different kind of urgency this time. A family was trapped on a quickly shrinking island of land near the old bridge, the water already lapping at their feet. The river churned brown, carrying debris, branches, parts of fences, and even small sheds downstream at speed. We launched the rescue boat, fighting the current with every stroke, the spray blinding us, making our efforts harder. The child on the island screamed, her parents holding her tight against the rising water, their faces streaked with mud and tears. We managed to pull them into the boat, shivering, soaked, and exhausted. Once safe on shore, their terror seemed to drain away just as quickly as the water had risen. They dried off by the fire at the community hall, recounting their close call with a strange, bored tone, as if they were discussing the weather. Another flood, another family saved, another story for the town to nod about. It was just how things were, a regular feature of life by the river. The old train tracks, abandoned for decades, ran along the edge of the woods. I sometimes walked that path, clearing my head from the last fire, from the last rescue. It was on one of those walks that I found the deer. Its body lay splayed across the rusted rails, a wreck of flesh and bone. Its limbs were twisted, pulled apart, and its head was nearly severed, hanging by a thread of sinew. There was no fresh blood, just a dark, matted stain on the ties beneath it, already drying into the wood. The ground around it held no footprints, no sign of a struggle, just the undisturbed pine needles. No train had run on these tracks in 50 years. Every time something like this happened, a deer, a dog, sometimes a bear, the whispers would start, growing louder in the taverns and grocery stores. The phantom train, people would say, running silent, swift, claiming its victims from the darkness. It was a story everyone knew, a horror they accepted, another one of the town's regular nightmares. You never saw it, but you saw its work. You saw the mangled bodies it left behind. And you learned not to question too loudly, or to look too closely at the tracks. The mine, always demanding, always taking, began its true reckoning 60 years ago. They called it the Great Collapse. Not a fire that time, but a tremor that shook the ground for miles, buckling timbers and sealing shafts. 24 men were down below, working the deepest veins. We sent rescue teams, working day and night, but the ground refused to give them back. The reports claimed rockfalls, cave-ins, no survivors. But everyone knew the truth. Those men had not died in the usual way. They had vanished. No bodies recovered, no trace found, just empty spaces where husbands and fathers had once stood. The mine just swallowed them whole. After that, the cold got worse in the tunnels, and the feeling of being watched became a real presence. Those small fires we respond to now, the ones that never quite spread, never cause true damage, they are only whispers of that deep, original hunger. The mine still calls for attention, for remembrance of what it took, keeping the memory of those vanished men alive in the suffocating air, in the endless dark. It makes its demands, and we answer. Then there was the mill, the towering steelworks that once fed half the town. It closed down just after the mine disaster, not with a whimper, but with a roar. The company packed up overnight, leaving a skeleton crew to dismantle what they could. One of those men, a foreman named Silas, had worked the furnaces for 40 years, his father and grandfather before him. He lost everything when they announced the closure. He returned one morning with a hunting rifle, walking through the deserted mill, firing shots at the empty machinery. He claimed the mill had stolen his soul, his family, his future. The remaining workers, scared and angry themselves, cornered him by the slag heaps. They beat him, tied a rope around his neck, and hung him from the highest gantry, a grotesque, swaying figure against the gray morning sky. The police arrived hours later, too late to do anything but cut him down. No one was ever charged. No one even spoke about it. That mill, now a skeletal ruin, still holds the rage. The wind carries a phantom whistle from time to time, sounding like the old steam engines, but also sometimes the distinct crack of a rifle shot echoing from the gutted buildings. You can hear it late at night, a sound that raises the hair on your neck. Sometimes people leave things at the old main gate, small offerings, empty plates of food, faded flowers, a child's toy. They are for the old mill workers, they say, a way to appease the lingering anger. Those offerings are always gone by morning. Nobody ever sees who takes them. Those two places, the mine and the mill, they are the anchor points. They hold the town in their grip, two gaping wounds that refuse to heal, radiating out into every corner of our lives. They define the chill in the air, the detachment in people's eyes, the questions that no one dares to ask aloud. The mine and mill anchor the larger horrors, but the curse touches us in smaller, more intimate ways. Disease often takes hold quickly here. A hacking cough starts in the chest, tearing at the lungs until nothing remains but a hollow space where life once resided. Skin discolors, turning a mottled gray and then a stark black, spreading from the fingertips and toes, consuming the flesh without pain, only a cold progression. These sicknesses do not follow the doctor's books. They twist the body into unnatural forms, leaving behind husks that scarcely resemble the people they once were. Deaths often come without warning. Sudden collapses in the street, inexplicable drownings in shallow bathtubs, or bodies found contorted into impossible shapes in their own beds. There are no answers, only the morbid curiosity of the funeral director, who has seen too many of these strange ends. We bury them, knowing another will follow soon enough. This curse has a cost beyond the visible wounds, a deeper toll carved into our very hope. We do not name our firstborn children too quickly here, and we do not decorate their nurseries with too many plans. A new life arrives, a fragile breath, and we hold them close, but a part of us always knows. We learn not to look too far into their future, not to dream of the schools they will attend, or the lives they might build. There is an unspoken understanding, a quiet grief that precedes loss, a preparation for an inevitable departure. It is a terrible knowledge, woven into the fabric of every family, a silent pact with the darkness that claims the first child, leaving behind only the quiet ache of what might have been. This is the true price, the constant echo of empty cradles, the constant reminder that nothing here truly belongs to us, not even our own children. Despite this unending shadow, despite the constant fear, I love this town. I love its gray mornings, its winding streets, and the way the river flows through its heart. This is my home, the only one I have ever known, the only one I ever will. Sometimes I question this attachment, this deep, unshakable loyalty. Is it truly love, or is it another facet of the curse itself, binding us here, preventing us from ever truly escaping? This town has always been here, a stubborn presence against the encroaching woods and the indifferent world beyond. But I know it is dying. I see it in the quiet eyes of its people, in the crumbling facades, and in the ever-present chill. It dies slowly, one grotesque body, one lost child at a time, each passing moment a further erosion. All I want with a deep desperation is for its memory to persist, for someone to remember what it was, what it endured. The dispatch radio crackled, tearing through the station house quiet once again. Engine 1, structure fire, abandoned mine shaft 3, possible ignition. Frank looked at me. I stood, reaching for my gear. The mine calls again.